and that they can move forward. So I'm excited about this opportunity to talk with some really remarkable people here. I have so much respect for those on this panel, and it shows what we can accomplish if we have the right type of education. And I'm honored again to be part of this conversation, and we'll make sure we make some changes so that all of our kids, no matter what zip code, what color, what creed, what background, can live the American dream. So thanks so much, Senator Scott, for this opportunity to join you guys today.
Absolutely, Congressman Owens. Thank you for your time and your energy and, frankly, your passion. It's always good to be able to connect the dots as it relates to both your background and your parents' background in education, especially your father's, and thinking about our Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, and her passion around the education. We certainly thank you for your service to our country over decades, but more importantly, I thank you for your leadership at the Hoover's Institute and your now focus on school choice. You all are doing groundbreaking work there, but I find it very interesting as Burgess was speaking and his father being involved in education and knowing that your story and the importance that that education played in your life. Will you talk to us for a few minutes about your passion?
Of course. And first of all, let me thank you, Burgess, Congressman, and Senator Scott, for your dedication to this, because you have a megaphone to remind people that education is the core value of this country in order to allow people to realize the American dream. People come to this country from other places. They're born in this country with the belief that it really doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. But that can't be true if you don't have a high quality education. And my family too, like that of Burgess's, was a family for which it was faith, family, education. It was the belief that if you were educated, even if you were growing up in segregated Birmingham, Alabama, as I did, that they couldn't stop you from achieving your dreams. And so you had to be twice as good, you had to work twice as hard. There were no victims. The minute you thought of yourself as a victim, you had given control of your life to somebody else, but you had to be educated and you had to study hard. My parents were both educators. My dad was a high school guidance counselor, later on a university administrator. My mother was a teacher, school teacher, but it was my grandfather that made the leap into education for the Rice family. He made his way as a sharecropper son to Stillman College in probably around 1919, 1920. He got there, he was going to pay for his second year with cotton. They said, well, you know, how are you going to pay for your second year? He said, I don't have any more money. They said, well, you have to leave. He said, well, how are those boys going to school? Well, they have a scholarship. How do you get a scholarship? Well, if you wanted to be a Presbyterian minister, then you could have a scholarship. My granddaddy said, that's exactly what I have in mind. And we've been Presbyterian and college educated ever since. But he understood that that was going to transform generations of Rices. And indeed, my Aunt Teresa would go on to get a PhD in Victorian literature at the University of Wisconsin in 1952 and write books on Dickens, of all things. So education is the core value, the belief that you should have the opportunity, not that anybody's going to determine your outcome. You can determine your outcome, but we have to give you the tools, and that's education. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because when I say it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going, can I really say that if I can look at your zip code and tell if you're going to get a good education? We have too many third graders who can't read. And you know that if you don't read by the time you're third grade, you're probably not going to read. And even more than when we were growing up, the economy today punishes people who don't have skills. And so we simply have to commit to a K-12 education system that is going to be for the best of our kids. And you mentioned school choice, and we are doing a lot of work here at the Hoover Institution on improving K-12 education and on school choice. And let me just say one thing about people who say, well, school choice will be a problem for the public education system. It's going to undermine public education. I fully believe in public education, but we have to recognize that we have a choice system. If you have means, you will move to a district where the schools are good and the houses are expensive. We all know where they are. Fairfax County, Virginia, Palo Alto, California. And so that's choice for parents. If you're really well off, you'll send your kids to private schools. That's choice. So who doesn't really have choice? Poor parents. And we have to give those poor parents, many of whom are minority parents, better options for their kids. And that is why I think the issue of parental choice is at the center of allowing us to give the kids who need it most an opportunity for a high quality education.
Thank you so much, Director. And I'll say that listening to you two and your backgrounds in education and your family's proud history of being educated, I think of the contrast of my background, where my grandfather was illiterate and my mother finished high school, and I struggled in high school for a year as a freshman. And thinking back to even earlier than that, by the time I was in the fourth grade, I had attended 4 different elementary schools, and it's really hard to get a great education if you're switching schools every year. The pain of not being able to make the connections and stay with your friends and have the same teachers, the kind of stability and certainty that comes from a solid education path, it could undermine your future. I'm so thankful that we live in a nation where the best and brightest is always in front of us. And if you never surrender, you never give up, great things can happen. And that's been my story and the story of millions of other Americans of all colors. And the thing I'd ask you both right now, I think Secretary Rice, you started the answer already on why school choice is important now. I thought you did a really good job of distilling the importance of the issues, and especially when you have the delineation between the wealthy who have school choice because they just pick the school they want their kids to go to and they send them, the middle class and the affluent who can pick the school district and then find the house. But for the working class person working paycheck to paycheck, every day, having long hours with lower pay, you don't have the same options for your kids. And the only folks, it seems like to me in America, who does not have a path to school choice are working class parents. And one of the reasons why today 80% of working class people support school choice, 76% of Hispanics support school choice, and one of the highest numbers ever recorded in history, 73% of African American parents support some form of school choice. Burgess, why don't you help us understand why the time is now for school choice and also for parental involvement?
The timing is perfect. This is probably the silver lining of COVID. We kind of, I mean, many of us grew up thinking that our kids, we have an education system going to take good care of them because we grew up in a system we're able to come through okay. But we didn't realize that things have changed over the last couple of decades. And we have children, again, as I mentioned before, when 75% of Black boys in the state of California cannot read and write, and we don't think there's anything wrong with that, then we have a problem as a nation. It all comes down to one simple thing. Our country is based on meritocracy. Our country is based on the fact that we want the very best for ourselves, want the best for our kids. And every piece of this country should be competing against each other. We were talking just before we got started about the NFL this last weekend. It was such a great weekend because we saw so much professional competition and at the highest level. Well, our school system should not think that just because they are public school system that they are entitled to have our kids. They should be competing for our kids. We should have the options as parents to say, based on my kids' the talents, their skills, their personality, that we should choose what's best for them. We are the parents. We know what's best for them. When we get to the position where we have a group of adults who say that, no, because you're poor, you have to stay here. Even though the school is failing, you have to stay here because the system is more important than your child. I've been hearing this for 4 decades now, how important the public school system is, which it is, as long as it's working. If it's not working, then like anything else in this country, we need to have a choice to do something that is working. The most important product in our society are our kids, and we need to start holding systems accountable. If they're not able to do the job, then we should have a choice of finding a place where kids can come through, have a great future, love our country, give back, and as we all as parents, we've all come to understand. My goal at the end of the day is my kids grow up and run circles around me in every single way possible. And I'll be so proud of them in doing that. And only by a good education can we get that done.
Well, Director Rice, you've already hit on this topic pretty hard, and I think your points were clear and consistent with the truth. You think about those zip codes where poorest families do not have access to the highest quality education. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to the conversation as relates to why school choice now?
I believe, as the Congressman said, this is a moment because COVID exposed just how deep the inequalities are in education these days. They expose that we have teachers unions, unfortunately, who somehow weren't willing to go in and teach. You know, I said to myself, I would have thought you would have declared yourselves essential workers.
Mhm.
You know, if grocery clerks can go in and be essential workers, teachers need to be essential workers and make it safe and all of that. But we've now seen that the learning loss is dramatic for all of our kids and even more dramatic for poor kids. And I will tell you why. Because, first of all, let me just dispel something. Poor parents care, right? Yes, there
Right.
are some dysfunctional parents. I
Absolutely.
understand that. But I've worked for more than 30 years with Boys and Girls Clubs, and I will tell you something. Poor parents care about their kids. They just don't have means. Now, what's happened to them during COVID? My mom actually homeschooled me, right? My first year at for first grade, the state of Alabama, in its wisdom, decided that if you didn't turn 6 by October 31st, you couldn't go to school that year. Well, I turned 6 November 14th. You think my educated parents were going to let me stay home for a year? No. My mother, who was a teacher, took a year out. She taught me at home. By the time she finished, I was in grade and everything. But now, fast forward to where we are now for the parent who maybe doesn't even speak the language, for whom access to the school was access to breakfast and lunch for the child. And so we have seen a failure of this system. We knew that it was failing many kids, but now it's been thrown right in our face as to how much it's failing our kids. And so I'm all for improving the public school system. I'm all for paying the best teachers more. But I'm also for giving people choice because I can't wait, if I'm a parent, another generation while we improve that school in my neighborhood and sacrifice my child on the idea that that school will eventually improve. And what poor parents are saying, you know, every time there's a voucher lottery, every time there's a lottery to get into good charter schools, parents are lined up around the block to get their kids in. And so they understand, and we have to support what they understand, which is that poor parents, it's not that they don't care, they just need better choices. And that's why this is the time.
Senator, can I add to that? And that
Please.
was that was so spot on in terms of
Yes.
the generations that have been sacrificed. We've been hearing this for forever. We're going to get the public school system in good shape, and what generation later is still not there. I think what the greatest moment we are is this. This is something I've had a passion for a long time because I've watched in my community how it's gone in the wrong direction for decades. But what we have is we've had in the past good people across our country who's sympathetic for those who are at risk. They want to help in some way, but it's a sympathy piece. Well, now we're actually with empathy. We realize that parents that in the past, because their zip code had choices, realize they don't have choices either. So all of a sudden, that connection of what we have, what my race has been dealing with, our race has been dealing with, is now felt by every other culture and race and zip code. And now is our moment to start having these conversations. I think choice is going to be the top on agenda coming in the coming years because we all recognize our children have been at risk for a long time and we now need to correct it.
Well, let me just let's pick up right there, Burgess and Condi, as it relates to the importance of parental involvement. And one of the things that you were talking about there, Condi, was the importance of learning loss and how parents are now seeing that learning loss is making it far more difficult for their child to get back on track. And frankly, when you think about going beyond learning loss, it's a sense of isolation that so many kids feel is a part of their lives now, and that's not good. I know that you served and have a passion around the Boys and Girls Club. And yesterday, during a parent panel, one of the parents, Denise, was talking about her involvement in starting mentoring programs. And I asked her, I said, what are your mentees saying? And they're talking about how this feeling of isolation and separation from their peers and the inconsistency of their schedule really does have an impact on their mental acuity, their ability to function at a high level. That's the passion of all three of us, having been mentors ourselves and having mentees. I think the parent involvement is a key component to creating that type of stability and certainty that all of our kids need. But those are some of the concerns that we heard from the parents. And let me just share one example. Nikki, who started a parent group, she said in Northern Virginia, she's not even allowed into the elementary school of her own child. That when she asked for more information from the teachers and then the principal for what are my kids learning, they said you basically needed to file a Freedom of Information Act to figure out what the kids are learning. I was dumbfounded by some of these comments. I'd love to hear your two perspectives as it relates to the importance of parental involvement and some of the comments that you've just heard me echo from the parent conference yesterday.
Well, all of my life as an educator, and I've been now an educator for decades, I heard, why I can't get the parents involved enough. I did have to say to my parents, no, you don't need to go to the school today, because they were there all the time. It was their milieu. But what we needed to do, and what my parents as educators believed was, and my mother in particular worked in a very impoverished area of Birmingham. She wanted the parents involved, but she wanted to make it possible and comfortable for them to come into a place where perhaps they weren't so comfortable. But whatever happened to the idea that yes, the teacher is there for 8 hours with the student, or what are 6 hours these days, but the parent is there for the lifetime. And so you want the parent to be involved. When we started, I started something called Center for a New Generation at the Boys and Girls Clubs. There are now several of them around the country, and they're high quality after school and summer programs for underserved kids. And we do it in the school district, with the school district, but we insist that a parent or an advocate for that child somehow be involved as well, because you need that adult in the child's life to be a part of their education as well. So I just don't understand the argument that parents can't be a part, shouldn't be a part. Of course, they should know what their kids are studying. Of course, they should have a say in how their kids are educated. It's not to displace the professional qualities or the professional training of the teacher, but you need to think of it as a partnership with the teacher and the parent if the child is going to really be well served. And oh, by the way, if all of those messages that you're trying to deliver in the classroom are going to be delivered at home as well, the parent needs to be a part of that partnership.
And let me just add to that, because I was very blessed, and I can't say that all enough, to be raised in the community I was raised in. Just so you know, my first experience exposure to white Americans wasn't until I was 16 years old. So everything that my foundation was based on, a community that I saw was all about our kids. My mom also, by the way, was a junior high school teacher. So education was really everything. The most important thing that we had was this partnership between parents and the teachers. It was the type of thing where there's so much respect for teachers that the worst thing you can do is get in trouble with the teacher, and hopefully they were going to tell the parents at home, because there's no way I can get out of it. I mean, I was going to have to deal with the consequences. And so
Why?
there we go. But that's because a couple of things. There was respect that was expected of us. I mean, I grew up in a time when it was yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes. I mean, it was no matter who the elder was, what color they were, it was a amount of respect. And there was a remarkable amount of respect for the teacher, because the teacher had the same end game as the parent. That is, their legacy was give this product that will go out and give a good name for their community, for their family, and be able to produce. And one day we'll be proud of that person. With that comes this confidence that if you are going to go going against obstacles, because the parent and the teacher is giving you the confidence, you can overcome it. When I left Tallahassee to go to the University of Miami, my goal was to be a biologist, marine biology. And one of the things I faced was someone who said I could never do it, because in those days, blacks weren't expected to do those kind of things. Well, because of the confidence I had between my parents and my teacher, I was determined to prove that person wrong. I spent the next 4 years in a library day in and day night to prove that particular person wrong. That was the way we were raised. It was, you see the challenge and you see yourself as a victor, and therefore you do whatever it takes to outwork and outrun and outproduce the person who has doubts about you. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to having high expectations for our kids and their potential. And if we see the failure going on, not put up with it at all. Enough of giving them room for people to allow kids to fail and think it's okay. So again, that partnership is imperative. And any place that does not going to give us transparency or allow the parents to be part of it, should have a choice to go someplace else.
Yeah, I just want to add to the point about high expectations, because even here at Stanford, I've taught at Stanford for over 30 years. If I have low expectations of my kids, they will live
They'll
down.
meet it.
And so I often say, you know, I would go to some little play that the kids are running around and dancing and whatever, and people say, isn't that cute? No, actually it's not. Let them practice, and it will be better for everybody if they understand that they're actually achieving something by working hard. And so in our families, you didn't have excuses for poor performance. You were expected to do your very best. And I have a story actually similar to that of Burgess. We moved to Denver when I was 12, and so I went to St. Mary's Academy, a very highly regarded college prep school, because believe it or not, my parents thought the Denver public schools were not as good as the segregated public schools I had gone to in Alabama. And so the Denver public schools were into experimentation with new math and all kinds of things. And my parents said, oh, math is just fun. So they sent me to a college prep school. I took the preliminary SATs, but I was very young. I was only 12 when I started ninth grade. And so I didn't do very well. And the high school guidance counselor said to me, well, you may just not be college material. I went home laughing and said this to my parents. It was all I could do to keep them from getting in the car right then and heading to the school to confront her. I said, don't worry about it. I don't believe what she said, because I had that confidence that my parents and my relatives and my community, the little place that I grew up in, Titusville, the place in Birmingham, Alabama, also produced the first National Merit Scholar in the state. Also produced a woman who became a governor of the IMF, first Black woman deputy governor of the IMF. The person who would go on to become the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Freeman Rabowski, who has trained more Black PhDs than any place in the country in STEM, lived right around the corner from me in segregated Birmingham, Alabama. So parents, community, family, and teachers, when they're one, the kid has a foundation that is unshakable when they meet those people who are going to have low expectations of you.
Well, that is a powerful story, and I love the list of successes that come from one small community in segregated Alabama. That just tells me that the best is yet to come. If we can coordinate, collaborate, and fuse our efforts together, we can make sure that more stories come from more parts of this nation than we had in the past. We should have more in the future. And I'll say, Burgess, we need to work harder on some legislation to make sure that the dreams that we're talking about today are realities tomorrow, because it sounds like they were yesterday, so they need to be tomorrow as well. So I know that I've been working on legislation from the School Choice Now, where I make sure that your pre-pandemic education course is cemented for your future in spite of the pandemic. I know that you have tackled a number of initiatives around education and choice. You want to share one or two with us?
I do, and thanks again for that. I'll say this: this topic we're having right now is the new civil rights. This is something, and the good thing is that it's just not a color thing. It's not just a culture. It's literally across our country, because we are competing against the rest of the world. And our kids are the very best if we give them an opportunity. They understand freedom. They understand vision. So this is a great conversation. Again, I want to thank you again for allowing me to be part of it. There's a Education Freedom Scholarship and Opportunity Act that I've actually introduced. And Senator Scott, I want to thank you for being a co-sponsor on a like bill in the Senate that was presented by Ted Cruz. Basically, what it does, it allows for federal write-offs for those who donate for individuals and companies that donate for at-risk kids. And it's something that the states will have to opt into if they want to do that. So it's still a state-driven process. They decide how it's going to be pushed out there, but it allows, again, for us to think about how can we take those of us who have gotten to the point where we can give back. How do we make sure our young people have the choice to go to the best place possible for their education? And this is one of those bills that's going to get it done. And I'm excited about that. Was one actually my first bill that I put in place when I joined Congress, because it was actually, again, where my passion is in a big way, to say the least. So we're going to see a lot more of this as we begin to work together, the Senate and the House, as we get into this new year. And I'm excited about pulling some triggers to get our kids these options that we really need to have.
Well, Burgess, you just raised a really important point. And Connie, I'd love to hear your comments on this too, because all across the country, there are businesses who want to invest in the education of our most marginalized citizens, literally giving them the incentive of a tax credit, maybe up to $5 or $10 billion nationwide, not for one business, but for all businesses, is part of the startup that we've been seeing around the Congress, looking for ways to get businesses more involved. And when you look at states that have education savings accounts, if you had businesses able to contribute to, let's say, for kids going to Title I schools, I mean, this would be a breakthrough opportunity to solve that zip code problem that you talked about earlier, Condi. And I know that my next question for you will be around the Hoover Institute's focus on school choice and parental involvement. But I do think that this is a great opportunity for us to get more businesses involved in the education structure and strength in their local communities.
I think it's a very important point, because one of the things that the United States has going for it that so many countries don't is what I'll call civil society. It means that the government doesn't have to do everything. The government just has to make it possible to do everything. And when you think about civil society, you think about the non-governmental organizations that are working and fighting for school choice and fighting for a good quality education for kids. But you also think of the business community that actually has a self-interest in making sure that there is an educated workforce.
Right.
And I like the fact, I myself is somebody who believe the founding fathers got it right to put most of the power in the states. And so when you look at states that can opt in, and they have reasons to have high quality education, because you cannot attract businesses to a state where there isn't a workforce that is prepared. And so businesses have a self-interest in creating the workforce, and indeed the workforce of the future. That means the workforce that can not just read and write, but can do STEM activities as well. And so having them as a partner, but having the federal government say, we're going to make it really worthwhile for you to do this because we know it's in your interest. That's an awfully good use of that. And then places like the Hoover Institution, what we do is that we do the research, we mobilize the data, we look in a clear-eyed way at problems and say, what have we not done well? What should we do more of? What isn't working? And we do that from a research, data-based way of looking at it. And that then provides an understanding of what the best policy courses can be. I just have to mention here that our inestimable Tom Sowell, one of the great economists of all times, and a tremendous advocate, now more than 90 years old, wrote a book not too long ago on charter schools. And he's still one of those voices. So what we here at Hoover can do is to make sure that we understand these problems from a data research base, and then we can give voice to those who want to take up the mantle of what I think Burgess correctly called the civil rights issue of our times. Because if you're not educated, you cannot exercise your democratic rights in this society.
And can I say this?
Amen to that. And I know Burgess getting ready to say something, but let me just say this before you hit that. When I was in a former lifetime, I was the chairman of the Economic Development Committee for Charleston County. And one of the things that we faced on an ongoing basis at that point in time, and we still do today, I'm sure, is companies would be prospecting, and they would ask about the education system and the ability of the students to be the workforce of the future. So I think you were spot on when you were talking about the importance of education as it relates to our business community. And when you talked about that civil society's responsibility may be more important than the government trying to do everything, let the civil society do everything and let the government set the rules of the roads. Thank you, Burgess. Go right ahead.
And just to kind of add on to what Dr. Rice said, our founders got it right. We're a nation, actually, believe it or not, we thrive on contrast once we see it. Here we are, we're talking, or we all have different platforms. We're talking, though, as we the people, about a solution that we now understand is a problem. We've gone for so many decades, really not understanding what was happening to our kids and the direction we were heading off to. Now, all of a sudden, just like Pearl Harbor or 9/11, we wake up one day and say, we have an issue. And no matter what side of the aisle we sit on, Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, we all love our kids. We all want a greater future. So we're coming up with solutions now that we just would not have had if we had not gone through some really tough times. And my confidence is the American people, once we know we're fighting together, we just win. As Al Davis used to say, Condi, we just win, baby. and that's who we are. So I'm thankful that we now have panels like this across this country, parents getting off the sideline, they're getting on the field, and we're going to get this thing accomplished because we do care about our kids, and we're the innovative nation. That's who we are. We'll come up with the right solution to make our kids, sure our kids have a great future.
If I may just say one final point, and that's about the national security perspective. As you know, that's really what I did for a living, was national security. There is no more important issue for us in terms of our national security than to educate our people, both for our internal cohesion and for our competitiveness abroad. We need to recognize that other countries out there are educating their kids, and they're educating to very high levels. We don't want to get to a place where we only educate some of our kids. The strength of America is that you were never prisoner of the circumstances of your birth. Tim, Senator Scott, you are a shining example of that. My dear friend, the late Colin Powell, was a shining example of not being captive of the circumstances of your birth. You get to move up in this society. And that has made us the envy of the world, that you weren't trapped into the place that you were born. And yet, if we can't make education available to all of our kids, we'll no longer really be able to say that, and we will be weaker, both as a country and weaker as a shining city on the hill, as Ronald Reagan said, as a beacon for others to understand that that's really when democracy is at its strongest, when everybody has a chance.
That is so powerful. Thank you both for taking the time and making the investment of your energy and your expertise to help us appreciate the importance of school choice. I was down here taking quick notes as quick as possible, but one of the things that I'd like to wrap this up with a couple of thoughts from both of you. I think Burgess said that sympathy has become empathy because all communities across this country now understand and appreciate the importance of parental involvement and school choice. It's when we feel sympathy for others, we want to be charitable. When we feel empathy for others, we want to invest. And that's what I feel like our parents across this country are saying. They want to invest not only in the education infrastructure of this country for their kids, but for all kids, because they now see how bad it is across the country and how much potential, frankly, there still is in a number of really important areas of the country. And I think it was Condi who said, ignorant and free cannot be. That should be the theme of school choice and parental involvement. You cannot be ignorant and free. It just cannot be. And as we move forward in this conversation, as we head to, frankly, Black History Month, if there is an issue that should be of paramount importance during this month of celebration, let's focus our time on the number one civil rights issue our nation faces today, and that's education. Thank you both for being here. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you all sometime in the very near future.
Thank you, my friend.